Well, hello good people. This looks way different, doesn't it? Please excuse the giant mess in front and behind the camera. As much as I would love to work from home, I just wouldn't get anything done. You guys understand, right? So the first rule of business in this new space is to get it into the mood, the fractal design mood. Wow. Now, Fractal Design definitely stole the show at Computex with the Mood and the Era 2 ITX enclosure, but people have expressed their concerns about GPU compatibility, especially in the Mood, considering its size and the lack of good GPU clearance, you know?
I mean, there's no doubt this is a handsome enclosure. The wraparound fabric should blend into your living room space or a clean desk setup, and there is some texture on both the light and dark models, and the gray fabric actually absorbs color beautifully if you are exploring some exterior RGB. As for cleaning the fabric, Fractal Design actually recommends a lint roller, so some creative exteriors require some creative solutions too. But how this fabric will last over time, or with cat claws or pet hair and dust accumulation and all the things being sucked through the front, I'm not sure, probably not well, especially because it is not user replaceable. You can see the fabric is actually glued to the exterior frame, and I found that really strange because I saw the screws, so you can remove the corner spines, but the fabric is glued all around, so it's not user replaceable. Perhaps they had other ideas for the exterior before the fabric went into production. And finally, someone is using the vertical shape with a massive exhaust vent at the top. It's one of the reasons why the cooling is so good on the Corsair One systems, and Fractal's 180mm fan is the perfect choice here. Although, could they not have simply rotated the fan? It's something you can do easily, by the way, so the shiny Fractal logo is not upside down. Come on, all this attention to aesthetics, you know? And despite this massive focus on aesthetics with the Mood, people might think it's an air purifier, air humidifier, some fancy trash can, some weird gaming console, or a speaker. The point is, it does not look like a traditional PC enclosure, which is awesome, but it is flawed in so many ways. I was hoping my disappointment from Computex would not translate into reality, but I'm feeling the pain now. Now, they say they worked really hard to make sure the porosity is good enough for airflow, but in reality, this fabric is really restrictive. By design, the sides of the shell are solid, so there's no air going through it. So the air is supposed to enter via the CPU intake, and also we have an opening for the GPU, of course, right? And it all exhausts from the top. By design, that all makes sense, but I mean, this is not very scientific, but trying to blow through this ventilation mesh at the front where the CPU cooler is supposed to be, absolutely nothing is coming through on the other end. You can see there's absolutely no light shining through this ventilation mesh, which is a good thing for the visuals, but performance is just horrible. And actually doing CPU temperature testing, it is way worse on the Mood than I expected, especially comparing versus the Terra, using the exact same L12S cooler with a fan set to intake, which is how it performs the best. And of course, trying to utilize all the cooling potential that we have available on the Mood with dual P28 fans set to intake, it's not a much better result, only a 6-degree difference improvement, which is not that significant. It's horrible. It's way worse still than the Terra. The culprit, of course, is this exterior fabric mesh, because removing it improved our CPU temperature significantly into the high 60s, which is an incredibly impressive result with that L12S cooler and the CPU running at 5 GHz. Of course, we have the two P28 fans helping with the intake, but still, this is very impressive. And for a case that is over 20 liters in volume, we have an extremely weirdly unoptimized interior, despite the fact that we have Terra and the upcoming Era 2 that brings some really innovative features in that movable spine arena, while the Mood doesn't have that. It locks you in a particular GPU scenario while giving you lots of configuration options and cooling stuff for the CPU. And I mean, it even looks disbalanced when you look at it from above, just how little room there is for the GPU versus the motherboard space. So only 2 slot cards will fit with max width of 58mm and 325mm in length. For example, my Strix 3080 is exactly 58mm thick, and it barely fits. And it's sitting right up against one of the worst filters for airflow, and it's really, really close. So good luck for acoustics and sound profiles. This is gonna be a disaster.
Question, why is it so cold in here? Well, I got new coolers installed,
Turns out they're a little too good. They're meant for computers, you know that, right?
I got them in every room. The price is just too good.
I guess the large VRM fans help with cooling.
Yeah, plus the pivoting connection hoses are wonderful.
I do love the styles and different sizes too.
The new Arctic Freezer 3 AIOs. Please use on CPUs only. They are specifically optimized for LGA 1700 and AM54. Check them out below.
All right, have fun with your freezer.
Now, the reason why I am so upset about the lack of proper GPU compatibility is because GPU cooling is actually excellent in the Mood. It is chart-topping. That top exhaust fan does a beautiful job of removing that heat. Now, interestingly, removing the exterior shell, as you can see, does not make our temperatures better. It actually makes them slightly worse. Interestingly, though, when I added the two P28 fans at full blast, I think it introduces way too much turbulence on the interior that the top exhaust fan has a hard time removing the heat from the GPU, and therefore our temperatures got worse. So having that information, I would say having vertical air coolers is the way to go. And if you're going with the AIO, just keep in mind it's going to be a pretty loud intake.
At least the corner frame is removable for easy install, but look at how stupidly small the cutout is for the PCIe power cables. It is absurd. So CPU cooling is therefore prioritized in the Mood with support for somewhat high tower coolers and a 240 or a 280mm AIO on this fan bracket. So even with my low profile downdraft cooler, I can get some decent intake with this cooler plus dual P28s on the side. I really do appreciate that the fan bracket is reversible in installation, so in case you want to rotate the AIO tubes, that is possible to do without reinstalling the radiator first. But I find the IO placement absolutely horrible, not just for the functionality of cable management and how all these cables have to cross the motherboard and the cooler, for example, but it's not a good placement if you have this case on the floor. So good luck trying to reach for the power button. Storage is extremely limited. First, we have this drive bracket that blocks a fan slot on the side, another SSD caddy in front of the power supply, and one of the weirdest SSD locations below the top fan that blocks half of your exhaust.
Also guys, this riser cable, man, it is janky. First of all, the graphics card is pressed right against it. It's super tight. And number two, you can see here it's already scratched up a little bit. And this is caused by the actual shell on the exterior. I made sure all the cables are tucked away when I was lowering it, but then it still got caught by the riser cable. So some of the shielding is starting to wear off, so I have some concerns. You also have to be careful with the exhaust fan because it has no guard on the interior, which is a really odd choice. Unfortunately, one of my front pillars came bent. You can see over here, it has a bit of a interior bulge. Here's a straight pillar right next to it. And I noticed it when I was trying to reinsert my fan bracket, and the holes were not aligned. You know, I had to manually flex it out for it to fit. Also, one of these plastic mounts just fell out. It is cracked in the middle and therefore doesn't stay in position. I don't understand why the power supply cable extension is so bulky. So facing this way is fine, but you take it out and rotating it for it to fit the other way for the power supply, if it's rotated, that was a really challenging fit as well, especially because the cable is really thick. And when we look at the bottom, there's enough height for everything, but the power cable is at 90 degrees versus everything else, so it will consume extra power length for your power cable. Just keep that in mind.
All these interior flaws makes me really think this was in production way before the Terra was launched, and perhaps there were some delays because like the framing isn't optimized even for itself. There's like little weird gaps and stuff that were maybe from some other tooling or whatever, because the Terra and the new Era 2 offer flexibility with GPU mounting and that balance between better CPU cooling or GPU. And here we have this perfect opportunity for this massive 20-liter interior, and yet all this focus on lots of cooling configurations for the CPU and very limited on the GPU side. I mean, it makes no sense. For the price of $149, I feel like this is a huge miss for Fractal Design. This could have been the perfect large ITX enclosure because this thing is absolutely massive for the lack of GPU compatibility that it might be capable of, and there's a lot of lost potential there. This to me feels like an unfinished ITX experience, and even though they might not be targeting like extreme enthusiasts in the SFX space, why not? This would be a perfect opportunity to include something that looks like a piece of furniture, but loaded up with the latest and greatest hardware, but it can't. You're gonna have to work within its frame limitations, and that's a huge letdown, okay? Especially with the Terra and the Era 2 on the horizon. All right, guys, let me know what you think of the new Mood. I'm in bad mood now because my expectations were way higher than what was actually delivered. I'm Dmitry. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one.